In Chapter 4, we're going to talk about two things. We're going to talk about feature detection, and we're going to talk about drag and drop, which is a new feature of HTML5. So what is feature detection? Feature detection is finding specific properties or methods in a browser's DOM to detect the browser type and whether it supports a given operation. Now, the DOM stands for Document Object Model, and I'm not going to go deep into that because it would just be too much to cover. It's basically, it looks at everything on a web page as an object, whether it's a p tag or a heading or even the document itself, or the web page is the window itself. There's a window object, there's a document object, there's the navigator object, but I'm not going to go deep into that, but that's how feature detection is done. It uses the DOM. Feature detection is not browser detection. They used to use the navigator object. They check the navigator object and the user agent property to find out the exact browser that the user was using, not the feature itself. And this isn't, it's very unreliable, which is why it's not recommended anymore. We have much better ways of doing that, which we're going to go through right now. And that brings us to third-party JavaScript libraries like Moderniser. Moderniser, it doesn't try to detect the browser, it detects the actual function or method or property. We could test for the canvas object, we could test for drag and drop, obviously, which we will be doing in the programming part of this section. And it's a much simpler code. When you would check for the user agent, you'd have 4, 5, 6 if-else statements, and just the code got cluttery, and it didn't even work some of the time. I mean, now if you look at the Moderniser code, it's as simple as this. You're just checking for the property, and that's it. You can download Moderniser for free. It's open source at moderniser.com/download, and it actually is a page where you can pick and choose which properties and objects you'd want to check for. So if you only wanted to check for, say, canvas or any kind of CSS3 property or selector, you could do that, and it would lighten up your code a little. So Moderniser is definitely, in my opinion, the best, but there's also other JavaScript libraries that you can use for feature detection. So how do we implement Moderniser? If you go to the page and you see you have a development version, there's a production version, it can look kind of complicated, but it's really not at all. I mean, all you need to do is generate the file and download it and include it in your HTML, and this is how you would do that. You would do it in the heads. First of all, you'd add a class to HTML called no.js, no dash hyphen whatever JS, and then down here you just include the script, the actual file that you downloaded, that you generated, and we've gone over this, how to include external scripts. So that's pretty much it. Once you've done that, you can use the functions and you can start using Moderniser. So Moderniser creates its own properties for each feature that it checks, that it tests for, whether it's canvas, drag and drop, and you can refer to these properties to check whether the browser supports the object and its properties. So here's an example, very simple. If Moderniser, it creates an object .canvas. If it's supported, then you would add your HTML5 code. If not, then you could display a message saying update your browser or whatever it is you want to do. And Moderniser is also very useful for CSS3, for the new CSS3 selectors and properties. Here's an example where you'd want an object or an area on the web page to have a gradient background. Okay, now you saw in the couple slides back we added the no.js class to the HTML tag, and this is what would happen if the browser didn't accept the new CSS3 gradient properties or selectors, and it would just have a background image. You would have to create a glossy image or a gradient image, and it would just default to that. And if the browser did accept the CSS3 gradients properties, this is what it would do. It would do the background image, and then this is all CSS3, the linear gradient function here. So very useful for CSS3. So now we know how to detect certain features such as drag and drop, and now I'll get into a little bit of the syntax for drag and drop. Now, like with most aspects of HTML5, we need to use some JavaScript to do the calculations or processing or animations or anything like that. So the first thing is that we need to set the draggable attribute to true. So if it's an image that we want to drag, we have to have this attribute and set it to true. Now, obviously, you'd have your source. You type your image in, the link to your image, but we do have to have this attribute. So we made the object draggable. Okay, we made this image draggable. Now what we have to do is specify what will happen when the element or the object or whatever you want to call it is dragged. Okay, and the onDragStart attribute calls a function, which is this function, drag event. Event is the parameter of the drag function. Okay, and that specifies what data to be dragged. Okay, if that makes sense. And then we have the ev.dataTransfer.setData method, which sets the data type and the value of the drag data. So this would be the value of the drag data and the type, text. Okay. Alright, so that brings us to the next part of the code, which is event.preventDefault. Now, what this does is, by default, the data cannot be dropped into other elements. To allow it to drop, we need to prevent the default handling of the element. So that's all we're doing right here, is just preventing the default action. Okay, so sorry about that. And the last thing we have here for our simple drag and drop script is the drop function. Okay, and the drop function takes the event as a parameter. Now, when the drag data is dropped, this event occurs. So we have the event.preventDefault. Okay, this is up here. It's going to prevent the default setting, so we can drop it, drag and drop it, and then we set this variable called data to ev.dataTransfer.getData text. Okay, you saw the slide before. We had the setData function to set it to text and the value, and now we have the getData function, and we're getting the type. In the last line, we have the target append child document.getElementById from the data. Okay, so it's getting the ID of data, and it's appending the child. So that'll actually do the drop. So we'll be able to drag something and drop it in. And this will be a lot easier to explain or to show you when I'm actually doing it. It's kind of hard to convey this code to you in English. So with that said, let's dive in and start coding.